street and hugging sparse hedgerows. As I did, I found myself humming a song Jefferson had taught me. We've come this far by faith. We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord. I knew I was doing the right thing. Even if I got caught, I had to try to get back to Mom and Jefferson. They'd given up almost everything to escape with me the first time. I owed it to them to get back. So many years later, I was in northern Uganda, where many of you have been, and I was there on a trip with community and philanthropists and World Vision, working for Rich at the time. And I was there to see the Women's Rehabilitation Center, where, as you know, the Lord's Liberation Army in Coney was quite severe, so they would maim women, they would rape them, they would cut off the arms of the boys and hold them in servitude for the army and keep the women as hostages. And World Vision ran this amazing rehabilitation center when the war was active. And we were there, and one night we walked with the children. As you know, the night walkers, some nights there would be very few, and other nights there would be thousands. Well, that night there were quite a few, and they started to surround us. In fact, it was a bit scary. And all of a sudden, I felt a little hand tugging at me on the side. And so I reached down and saw this little girl who told me her name was Rose. And she grabbed my hand and she said, "Take me with you." And you know, all of us have an opportunity to think about how we take someone else with us. My call to action for all of us is to think about how each of you connect your own story not only to your work, but to your daily lives and to the change in the world you want to see. Because if it's not daily, it really doesn't make a difference. You've got to choose the charity within every day, no matter what the anger is, no matter what the conflict. You've got to then have a plan for having a social impact in your life, regardless of your circumstances. You've got to then be a part of a community like Global Washington, so you can be fed and be able to have peers and community to support you. And you need to engage with key organizations like those of you in the room so that you really are making a difference. And last but not least, because I do believe this, you have to really commit your time, talent, and treasure. Each of us has a journey, and that journey is important not just to us, but to the people around you. It's what allows us to make our work personal. It's what allows us to connect to the global development goals, to our own organizations. It's what allows us to help others find the charity within. I want to close with a song that Jefferson used to sing. Jefferson was quite a person. He had an 8th grade education. He couldn't read the newspaper very well, but he could read the Bible from cover to cover. And this was one of his favorite songs. I wonder, do you love the Lord as I do? For what he gave to me was given to you. Are you staying here content? Will your soul someday repent? Will you show a child the way? Will you do your best, even in distress? Will you do some good each day? I wonder, do you? Thank you for what you do every day.
I was hanging out in the hallway. Yeah.
Well, I personally want to thank Scott for an amazing amazing story of his own journey and inspiring all of us. Really, really moving, really moving. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carol Dahl. I'm Executive Director at the Lemelson Foundation. We're a private family foundation based in Portland, Oregon, and we work on improving lives through invention. We believe that inventions, new approaches, innovations, and entrepreneurship are required to both help people address basic human needs, but also to allow them to enhance their livelihoods and lift themselves out of poverty. We focus on something we think of as impact inventing, which means how do you use invention to create positive social outcomes. Do it in an environmentally responsible way, something we maybe don't think about as much as we should, and turn it into value, creating financially self-sustaining systems so that those products can be delivered to people who want them and need them. We do that through creating ecosystems that will helping to bolster ecosystem in countries that will allow people to solve their own problems and take them into products and solutions that reach people, but also creating the pipeline of human capital that will create those inventors, entrepreneurs in country who will solve problems not just for today, but for tomorrow. You know, we find ourselves, I would comment, I'm very thankful, thank Kristen and also the team and the board here for inviting me to chair this panel. I'm kind of at awe of the panelists we have here today, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. But we find ourselves in sort of tumultuous times. I don't know if the rest of you are feeling this. I've been discussing this with friends lately. A bit unsettling. And among some of the things unsettling, I think, is that we found around us in our communities, but also even at the level of federal government, some questioning of whether what we do in terms of aid and the kind of work we do in this room and beyond in the communities we reach, whether it's headed the right direction, whether it's needed in the current form, whether it needs revision. Is there really some kind of disruption that needs to happen? And so we're here today, and our charge as a panel is to talk a little bit about disruption and whether disruption is needed, and if so, in what way it's needed in global development. And so when I think about disruption, what does that mean? It means you're going beyond the evolutionary, beyond the incremental. You're actually making big leaps and changes in new ways and new directions that you maybe haven't seen in the past. And how do we do that? Well, we do it at the level of what we do. For us at the Lemelson Foundation, we do invention. So in fact, by definition, we're kind of doing disruption. But we also think about in how we do it, right? So we work at an ecosystem level. We think there's change in ecosystems. We work in countries. We want to empower people in the country. That's our approach. We take risk. We're willing to do that and stay in things for a long haul. We think about disruption that way. We're going to explore it a little more deeply here with our panelists who have been deeply experienced in this space, and I'm very excited to introduce them. We're going to explore sort of the what is disruptive and how we go about doing that, but also what's the leadership that's required, both within your institution, but also as you think of as a community, and those of us in a room as we lead communities in trying to make that difference. So I'm very excited to introduce our panelists. We have a terrific lineup here. We have sitting next to me here Harry Bader, who is the Acting Executive Director of the Global Development Lab at USAID. We have Bill Hill, who is here, who is the relatively new CEO of Vulcan. And then we have Neil Kinney-Geyer, who I'm sure most of you in the room know and has really been a pioneer for years and years and years at Mercy Corps.
You feel old yet?
That was not an age statement. That was a leadership statement, Neil. Leadership statement. So really thrilled. Great panel. So we're going to start off by getting to know a little bit about the work you're doing and also a few of your perspectives on what really is the disruption that might be needed that you see in the community and how are your organizations taking that on. Maybe I'll start with you, Bill, not to go in order. I'll start with you, Bill, to ask, tell me a little bit about how you think about what are the opportunities for disruption and how at Vulcan you're thinking about disruptive change and what Vulcan might do in that.
Sure. Well, it's good to be here and welcome everybody, and it's nice to be on the panel with these guests, and you're not that old. So at Vulcan, we're the engine behind Paul Allen's mix of commercial and philanthropic initiatives. Some of them well known, like the football team down the street, and a variety of things we've done in wildlife conservation and Ebola and other areas that we'll talk about a little bit more in the panel. And so it's a combination of things that we involve, and we try to stitch those together in many cases. How we do real estate, we think about it, how do we impact the community? How do we use technology to cause disruption? And it stems from our founder, and a lot of what Paul starts with is what if? You know, what if we could have these things happen in the world that aren't happening right now? How do we change the arc of the problem or the improvement? So disruption isn't we really don't even call it out at work. We don't say like, now's the time for the disruption meeting. We work in that default mode, and frankly we kind of reject the conventional because we feel it's not an area that we can really go in and do what we do best. And so it's a common theme throughout our work. And I think you're right in our current climate. Not just the current climate as a metaphor, disruption is required in so many different areas. We have situations that we see all day long, and sometimes it's depressing. You know, we have meetings we'll all be in just today where, you know, my children may never see a coral reef again. You know, I learned today. Pretty crappy meeting, to be honest, you know. And we go right into how do we fix that? How do we make that not true? We're looking at, you know, some pandemic systems that right now a team just came back from Africa. I was meeting with them today and talking about what they learned and what can we do to create an early warning system for pandemics. And so each of these areas, I can go on and on, each of these areas require